ਜੇ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਠੀਕ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਇਸੀ ਨਾਲ ਬੈਠੇ ਤਾਂ
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸੋਨੀ ਸਿੰਘ ਚਿੱਬਰ ਸਰ ਵਾਲਾ ਮਾਈਕ ਆਫ ਕਰ ਦਿਓ ਜਦੋਂ
ਕਰ ਛਿੱਬੜ ਦਾ ਆਫ ਕਰਾਣਾ
ਜਦੋਂ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਨੋਟ ਦਵਾਂਗੇ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਕੋ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਇਕੋ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮਾਈਕ ਬੰਦ
We are live now.
क्वेश्चंस ही सुन
Okay.
सुनने दे सुनने
Okay, beta, thank you. Dr. Soni,
हाँ जी
live now. So, once again, I welcome everybody in the 7th weekend webinar of Association of Microbiologists of India, Chandigarh Unit Weekend Lecture Series. So, I request Professor S.K. Soni to give a welcome note to today's speaker and all who have joined with us. Professor Soni, please.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen. Good morning to all of you. On the 4th lecture of the weekly lecture series launched jointly by AMI Chandigarh Unit and Department of Microbiology, Punjab University. And we have with us Dr. Sanjay Chibbar, the speaker of our today's program. Dr. Prince Sharma, Professor, Department of Microbiology, Punjab University, and President of Chandigarh Unit of AMI. Dr. Kusam Harzai, Chairperson, Department of Microbiology, Punjab University. Dr. Naveen Gupta from the Department of Microbiology, Punjab University, who is also the General Secretary of the Chandigarh Unit of AMI. The members of AMI and the other participants who have joined live on the Facebook. I welcome all of you on behalf of the Chandigarh Unit of AMI and the Department of Microbiology. Let's start today's proceedings with the introduction of the speaker, and I invite Dr. Naveen Gupta to introduce the speaker. Dr. Naveen, please.
Thank you, Dr. Soni. Today I am feeling privileged and honored to introduce today's speaker. We have with us Professor Sanjay Chibbar. Professor Sanjay Chibbar did his master's degree from Medical College, Rohtak, and immediately after doing his MSc, he joined Punjab University, Chandigarh on a faculty position in 1978. He has more than 40 years of teaching and research experience. By Department of Science and Technology in 1992 to work at the University of Nottingham, UK. He was visiting scientist at Northumbria University, Newcastle upon Tyne, UK from 2006 to 2009. He has been an active researcher and he has handled and successfully completed a large number of research projects. There is no funding agency which I think I have not to name when his funding ability has to be counted, be it UGC, be it ICMR, DST, DBT, SERC. And international funding agencies also have supported his projects. He supervised 2 international PhD students enrolled at Northumbria University, UK and Queensland University, Australia. His main area of research has been applied microbiology with special emphasis on understanding of host-parasite interactions and their control. He has guided 40 PhD students, so a 40, huge number, from India and abroad, and 62 MSc students for the research work. He has published more than 250 research papers in international journals, and most of these papers are in very high impact journals. He has also published book chapters and filed patent over the years. Recently, he has been awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by Microbiology Society of India in 2019 for his contributions in the field of medical microbiology. Apart from counting his academic credentials, I am feeling little emotional and very privileged to say something about Professor Chibbar. I know him from last more than 30 to 35 years. I have seen him in various capacities. I have seen him as a teacher, as a friend, and now as a faculty member. And in all these capacities, I can see that he is a wonderful personality, always helping hand, and a wonderful teacher for all the students. So, sir, we are honored that you are with us for today's lecture. I invite Chibbar sir to, as I call him, Professor Chibbar, I am saying only formally. I love him calling Chibbar sir. So, Chibbar sir, I invite you for today's lecture. Please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naveen Gupta. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of this lecture series for giving me this opportunity to interact with the fellow members of this unit. I will be talking about antimicrobial resistance, and then I'll talk about the treatment options which are being looked into to treat diseases or infections caused by drug-resistant bacteria. The AMR, or the antimicrobial resistance, is rising among important bacterial pathogens to the common antimicrobial therapies. They do not respond, and this emergence of multi-drug resistant bacteria is increasing at an alarming rate, and it constitutes one of our greater challenges to combat bacterial infections and accompanied diseases caused by drug-resistant bacterial pathogens. There are various mechanisms of drug resistance. I'm not going into the details, but what I would like to mention over here is that the global spreading of antibiotic resistance genes and their acquisition by clinically relevant bacterial pathogens is considered as a serious health problem. And taking the example of my own country, India, about 30 million healthcare associated infections were reported in 2017, approximately leading to 50,000 deaths. So this is about a developing country like ours, and I'm comparing it with a developed country like US, where a report from Center for Disease Control and Prevention, that is CDC Atlanta, in 2018 showed more than 2 million infections and 20,000 deaths annually caused by antibiotic-resistant bacteria in US alone. And they also listed the top 18 drug-resistant pathogens which are considered as a threat, and they have categorized these pathogens. The clinically most relevant pathogens, they include Enterococcus faecium, Staphylococcus aureus, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Acinetobacter baumannii, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and Enterobacter species, which are together summarized as escape pathogens, that is the ESKAPE pathogens, and this term has been given to emphasize that they efficiently escape the effects of the common antibiotics. If we look at the prevalence all over the globe, you can see the dark areas, they represent the prevalence of drug-resistant bacteria. And though I do not have the data for my own country, but if you look at the whole picture over here, you find that these drug-resistant bacteria are prevalent in almost all the subcontinents. And India, we are also aware that this has got a large number of drug-resistant bacteria. This serious threat is no longer a prediction for the future. It is happening right now in every region of the world and has a potential to affect anyone of any age in any country. Antibiotic resistance, when bacteria change, so antibiotics no longer work in people who need them to treat infections, and this is now a major threat to public health. This statement came from WHO way back in April 2014. At present, the current situation of antimicrobial resistance is that this has been identified as a global health threat, which has serious health, political, and economical implications. World Health Assembly and its regional committees has prioritized this issue in many of its meetings, and the resolutions have been passed. In 2011, during the Jaipur Declaration on the Antimicrobial Resistance, the Home Ministers from Southeastern Asian countries, including India, are signatories to control the prevalence of AMR. in the 2013 National Policy for Containment of AR came, and again the Global Health Security Agenda Action Plan prioritized this issue again, and India is one of the contributing countries. World Health Assembly requested the development of Global Action Plan on AMR, and this was in 2014, and WHO Secretariat level there was development of the Global Action Plan. According to the Global Action Plan, there are various objectives. These include, number one, improve awareness and understanding of AMR. We all know that the general public is not aware of this term and its implications, and therefore it is very, very important to make them aware. And I know that in my country, various NGOs and various other groups are doing this job at the movement. They are making the masses realize what is AMR and what are its problems. Second issue is strengthen the knowledge through surveillance and research. And surveillance can be done at various levels, starting from the hospital level to the state level to the country level. And this gives us an idea about the kind of antimicrobial resistance prevalent within the country. The important point is to reduce the incidence of infection, which is true about almost all the diseases. The infection can be reduced by adopting general public health measures or through prophylaxis. Coming to the fourth point, which is most important, because prevalence of AMR has been related to the indiscriminate usage of antibiotics, not only in the health, but animal and the food sectors also. And therefore, there is a need to optimize the use of the antimicrobial agents in all these sectors. Next point is develop the economic case of sustainable involvement to meet needs of all countries. And finally, to increase the production of the new medicines, the new diagnostic tools to give us the reliable results, effective vaccines, and other interventions. This slide I've taken from a social media where they have compared the antibiotic resistance pattern of an isolated in 2009 to 2019. And here you can see the 2009, the bacteria responded to almost all the antibiotics tested, whereas in 2009, same antibiotics when these tested, the organism showed resistance. So this shows that the AMR or the antimicrobial resistance has increased rampantly among the bacterial pathogens during the last 1 decade. And colistin was considered as a drug which can be instituted when there is an infection by an antimicrobial resistant strain. But this report from the Denmark, which was published by the Antibiotic Resistance Action Center in Milken Institute School of Public Health, states the news that the dangerous colistin resistance gene has been found in Denmark is alarming. This newly identified gene called MCR1 is on a mobile piece of DNA that can make copies of itself and then jump from bacterium to bacterium, spreading resistance. History shows that these mobile resistance genes can spread around the world in people, animals, and food. The news that MCR1 has been discovered in Denmark suggests that this scenario is playing out in real time. And for the information of the audience, I would like to say that this has happened. We also have colistin resistant strains in our own country, as well as reports from the adjoining country, China also. Reports have appeared where colistin resistant genes, colistin resistant gram-negative organisms have been encountered. This raises an issue. Are we really heading to a post-antibiotic era? Because if we have no antibiotic to treat the infection, then is this situation arising? And in this slide, I am saying that it has been predicted that AMR by 2050 will be responsible for majority of the deaths, and the number of the deaths will exceed the number of deaths from any other infection, including cancer. And therefore, this is a situation where we need to think about it, that this AMR is increasing at a very fast rate, and we should have means to check their spread as well as control the infections caused by antimicrobial resistant strains. So the current shortage of effective drugs, lack of successful preventive measures, and only a few new antibiotics in the clinical pipeline demand the development of novel treatment options and alternative antimicrobial therapies. Here I would like to talk about the antibiotics, the newer antibiotics which are appearing in the market. If we look at the number of antibiotics which came in the market during the 1970s and 80s, the number is quite high. But over the years, their number has declined. And if we look at the recent chart, the antibiotics introduced are very less. The reason is that developing a new antibiotic takes a lot of effort, lot of time, lot of money, all these things, but the bacteria is so smart that it develops resistance to the particular antibiotic within no time. And that is the reason that the pharmaceutical industry is now basically concentrating in modifying the already existing antibiotics through chemical modifications and so on. And therefore, there is a limited supply of the newer antibiotics. And as a result of which, it has been thought now that the alternative therapies should be looked into, which have a completely new mode of action. And the list I'm providing over here is, this is basically to control AMR. This is nothing to do with the drug resistance, but it's basically to control AMR. And these include phage therapy, antivirulence strategies, antimicrobial peptides, therapeutic antibodies, vaccines, potentiators of currently used antibiotics, and antibacterial biomaterials. And I will talk about all these one by one, but my major emphasis will be on the phage therapy or the bacteriophage therapy. Now, before I go and talk about bacteriophage therapy, I would like to talk about two cases which made headlines in recent years. In 2016, the life of Thomas Peterson, who is a professor of psychiatry at the University of California, San Diego, was saved by phage therapy after he developed a deadly Acinetobacter baumannii infection during his visit to Egypt. And this experience has been recounted by him in a book known as The Perfect Predators, the book which was released by Professor Peterson last year at the India International Center, New Delhi, and I happened to attend this particular meeting. This book has been co-authored by him with his wife, who is an epidemiologist, Steffi Estaddi, and she is the person who basically helped him to recover from the severe infection caused by Acinetobacter baumannii by arranging bacteriophages against this pathogen from various American laboratories. The second case which I would like to talk about is that last year, the life of an English teenager was saved after she developed an infection following a lung transplant for cystic fibrosis. So with these two examples, I am saying that bacteriophage therapy is not only at the experimental stage now, but this is a reality. And now this is a market, is a wide or big market is going for bacteriophage therapy. Many pharmaceutical industries have shown their interest and they are working on this. The various issues are being solved, and this will soon be available for the public. But at the moment, this bacteriophage therapy is only being used by a limited groups. For the students as well as the new people who are not aware of what bacteriophages are, I'll start from the very basic, that these are the specific viruses which are present in the environment. And in fact, we isolate them from the environment only. And these phages or bacteriophages, they are the viruses of the bacteria. So they do not infect the mammalian cells. They can show either the lysogenic or the lytic cycle. I will explain this in my next slides. But only thing I would like to mention over here is that this is not a newer idea. In fact, this was a predominant therapy during the first half of the 20th century, but this was abandoned by the Western world when the antibiotics were introduced. But Eliava Institute in Georgia kept on practicing this therapy, and today this is the only institute which is one of the most sought after place where people who are infected with drug-resistant isolates, they go for their treatment. The only problem in the initial stages was the poor documentation of these clinical applications, because majority of the published work was in Russian language, but now this has been translated in in English, and therefore there is no problem in understanding this. The second thing which I would like to mention is that I am talking about the application of phages as a therapeutic agent, but the phages have got a wider application nowadays. So they are not only being used for therapeutic purposes, but a lot of people are exploring them in the food industry, in the aquaculture, in what we call industry, in animal diseases against environment, and therefore this is a very growing area. And food industry, the FDA has already approved a strategy for controlling the infection, the presence of the poultry products, meat and poultry products. I would also like to quote one other example, and this is about a company known as Gangajan, which is located in Bangalore, and initially they were also working, exploring the use of phages as therapeutic agents, but they also now have diverted their interest. And recently I heard them talking about that they are looking for phages to take care of the foul-smelling bacteria in the environment. So as a result, a lot of interest nowadays have been generated, and a lot of people within our country, I'm aware, they have come up and they are doing work on bacteriophages, and that is the reason that the Bacteriophage Society for Research and Therapy has been created. And this is a platform where all the young scientists who are working in this area can be brought together. They can discuss and they can have collaborations and so on. The society is also going to take out recently a newsletter where the achievements of the various scientists working in this area in India itself will be circulated among the scientists. Now, this particular slide shows the lysogenic and the lytic cycle. I will not go into the details, but only thing I would say, in the lysogenic cycle, the phage gets into the host chromosome, multiplies with it over the generations unless until there is a spontaneous induction or environmental stress. But in the lytic cycle, from the very beginning, the aim of the phage is to multiply and get released and go and infect the other cells, and this thing I will explain in my other slide. Before I go and talk about the life cycle, I would like to talk about the phage structure. The phage has got a head, which is a raccohedral consisting of the capsomeres. The genetic material is enclosed within the head. It is attached through a collar to a core or a helical sheath, at the base of which there is an hexagonal base plate, and then there are the tail pins. And these tail pins, in fact, help the phage identify the specific receptors on the bacterium. And once it recognizes, it attaches to the receptors, and through which then it injects the DNA material and the further multiplication cycle goes on. And this is clear from this particular slide. Here you can see the phage comes, it identifies the specific receptors, attaches to them, and once attachment, then there is a penetration. The DNA from the phage is put inside the bacterium, and once the genetic material comes inside the bacterial cell, it directs the host to form proteins for its own multiplication, as a result of which the proteins are formed. And finally, there is an assembly of these proteins. The new phage particles are produced, and the release takes place by disrupting the cell membrane through the lysins, which I will be talking in my today's presentation as well. And these phages, they go and infect the newer healthy cells. Now, this place, I'm just showing you that here you can see there is a cell, a single cell, and see a single cell entered the phage, the bacterium, but such a big progeny of phage particles is coming out of this one bacterial cell, and they all will go and infect the fresh cells. So this way you can see that till the host is available, the specific host is available, the phages, they keep on entering into the cell, they keep on multiplying, and their number keeps on increasing with time until the host is available. And this is an electron microscope picture where you can see the phages inside the bacterial cell. Now, this slide basically is showing you the important differences between bacteriophages and antibiotics. And as you can see from here, phages are always bactericidal because I said we use the lytic phages. So when we use lytic phages, they are always bactericidal, but the antibiotics are both bacteriostatic and bactericidal. The second is the bacteriophages are highly selective, and therefore they can be used for targeting of the specific pathogens without affecting the desirable bacterial flora which may be present within the vicinity, and therefore it is unlikely to affect the colonization pressure of the patient. On the other hand, antibiotics are not able to differentiate between the pathogen and the normal microorganisms or the normal microflora of the host, and as a result, their non-selective action affect the patient's microbial balance, and which may lead to various side effects. And we all are aware that when we are on an antibiotic, we are always given supplements to take care of our normal microflora. The third difference is that phage specificity, their use is not likely to select for phage resistance in other bacterial species because it is only specific for a bacterium. So other bacterial species will not be affected. But in case of antibiotics, they may select for resistant mutants of many pathogenic bacterial species. Humans are exposed to phages throughout their lives. These are well tolerated, and only few minor side effects have been reported from therapeutic phages. On the other hand, the antibiotics, they have got multiple side effects, including the intestinal disorders, allergies, and secondary infections have been reported. So this is the primary difference between a bacteriophage and an antibiotic. And on this basis, then I say the phage-based therapies could provide us with the key to unlock new approaches in combating bacterial pathogens with many applications. And this I say on the basis of the research which has been carried out for more than 1 decade within my laboratory. And we have isolated these phages from the environment. We have purified them. We have grown them on a larger scale. We have characterized them. In fact, characterization now is being done both on the genomic and the phenotypic properties. And the proteomics is also being used for characterizing these phages. And once these phages are characterized, then other properties of these bacteriophages are checked: their life cycle, their burst size, their binding adhesion ability, their host range, and on all these bases, we select the phages which are very effective in killing the bacteria, and those lytic phages then they are selected and then they are used as for therapeutic purposes. In my laboratory, we have used them in experimental models of bacterial infections such as the respiratory tract infection, a burn wound infection, septicemia, and urinary tract infection. And in all these cases, we have observed that these phages are very, very effective. In fact, if we institute the phage therapy at an early stage, a single dose of phage is good enough to take care of the infection. And since I say this, I would like to see that there are various parameters which also need to be standardized before the phages are instituted for their evaluation in the system. And these include the dose which you will give in terms of the plaque forming units, the PFU per ml, the time of institution of the phage therapy, the route of giving the phage therapy, and so on. All these parameters need to be standardized before making their in vivo evaluation. And on the basis of the research which has been carried out in the laboratory, we say that phages are, we have found phages very effective in the experimental model system. And therefore since they have the advantages over the antibiotic therapy, and therefore they can be used effectively against multi-drug resistant pathogenic bacteria. They are highly specific, and therefore phages, they target the desired bacteria only without affecting commensal bacteria. They are useful for people with allergies to antibiotics. They are self-replicating, as I said. Their number keeps on increasing till the host is available. But at the same time, they are also self-limiting, which means that once the host is not available, they will stop multiplying, and the inbuilt immune system or the reticuloendothelial system within the body will take care of the existing phages. And finally, they can be either used in a monotherapy or they can be used in a cocktail therapy with or without antibiotics. When I say monotherapy, what I mean is the single phage, but these days people are preferring the cocktail therapy. The reason is monotherapy, the chances of phage resistant bacteria developing is higher, and therefore the cocktail therapy is being advocated. But only thing again I would like to say over here is, yes, the cocktail therapy is very effective, but it is not that simple that you take two phages, you mix them, and you can make a cocktail. No, we have to first study the compatibility issues of the various phages, and those phages which show compatibility to each other, then all of these are mixed together, and then they are can be used over a longer time, because they also help the phages to be stable. Once they are compatible, not only they will be effective, but the stability issue will also be checked, and such phage preparations then can be stored over a longer period of time. I said they can be used with or without antibiotics. Yes, there is no hindrance when we use both together. In fact, I have observed synergistic effect in many cases when we use phages along with the antibiotics. And this work is all published from our laboratory, and therefore I'm not discussing that in details over here. There are certain disadvantages of the phage therapy, though primarily these are theoretical, but still we have done research in this area as well, and we have tried to solve these issues as well. And first of all, I'll make you aware of the issues, and then I will talk about how these have been answered. Number one is the immunogenicity. Phages, they act as foreign antigens which induce strong antiphage humoral responses, resulting in rapid and efficient neutralization. But I would like to mention over here that this is not the situation in case of the acute infections. We are treating an acute infection because we all know antibodies, they take around 7 to 10 days to develop. So this is not going to be an issue as far as treating an acute infection is concerned. But yes, in chronic infection, this could be a problem. And this, how we have solved it, I'll explain it in my next slide. The second is the rapid clearance by the reticuloendothelial system. Merrill et al. In 1996 proposed that reticuloendothelial system clearance of phages from patients may be a potential problem because it might reduce the number of phages to a level which is not sufficient to combat the infecting bacteria. The third problem is that these phages, they do not have the ability to penetrate in the deeper layers of the skin, and therefore they are unable to reach the deeper wounds if we are instituting the topical phage therapy. The next point is that the phages are usually effective against extracellular bacteria because they do not have the ability to enter inside the myeloid cells like macrophages. So these intracellular bacteria, which are multiplying within the organism, will not be available to the phages, and therefore they will thrive, they will multiply, and they will be responsible for the relapses. And over here, it may be a salmonella or maybe a staphylococcal species. The next point is the poor stability and or viability of phage preparation, because these phages, they are not very stable over a longer period of time, and they need to be tested and monitored every time before use. And therefore, this is again a theoretical problem which is being envisaged by the scientists. This we have been able to solve by using the phage delivery system. And over here, what we have done is we have done this work for the first time, where we incorporated the phages into the lipophilic vesicles, such as the liposomes, such as the transferosomes, and these phage delivery approaches, as we all know, need to develop that can deliver phages, thereby increasing the efficacy of the treatment. And what we observed was that when these entrapped phages in the delivery system were used, they led to better phage retention, stability, deeper penetration into skin, reduction in its rapid clearance by the reticuloendothelial system, provided protection from immune system, and increased the viability and the stability of the phage preparations. Now, this particular slide basically indicates that the delivery systems using different compositions and different formulations were prepared within the laboratory, and the formulation giving us the best results in terms of the morphological features and the other characteristics were selected. The phages in a cocktail were put inside these phage particles, these lipophilic vesicles, and once we prepared them, then this was used for in vivo system. Now I'm talking about how we were able to tackle the issue of the immunogenicity. Now, if you look at the table which is presented over here, the first two lines you can see we have incubated the phage along with the phage specific antibodies. The antibodies were used in different titers. And if you look at the number of bacteria under the head bacteria, you can see that from 5.5 log, it got to 7.68, which indicates that when we incubated the phage with the specific antibodies, the phages were neutralized, and therefore they had no effect on the bacteria, and the bacteria kept on multiplying. But the last line you can see, when the phage was the phage entrapped within the liposome was incubated with the specific antibodies, the antibodies had no effect on the phage, and which is clear that from 5.1 the number came down to 2.8. Now this shows that once these are entrapped within the liposomes, the antibodies, they do not get excess, and therefore there is no neutralization of the phage, and this would work in vivo as well. The second is the rapid clearance by the reticuloendothelial system. I am also not providing the data over here because there were many slides, because we have checked them in different organs. The bioavailability was checked in spleen, in liver, lung, and kidney. And what we observed was that the lipodal delivery system of the present invention increased the viability and the stability of the bacteriophage preparation and was capable of bypassing the reticuloendothelial system. The encapsulated phage persisted for a longer time in spleen as compared to the other organs. So this is the results of the rapid clearance by reticuloendothelium. The second is the third, in fact, is the poor penetration in the deeper wounds. As I said, they are not able to penetrate through the stratum corneum, and therefore they are not able, and which is visible in slide 1, where you can see that the phages are located, the fluorescent dye phages are located on the surface of the skin, without much invasion into the skin. But when we took the entrapped phages within the lipid vesicles, they penetrated through the skin and they could reach the lower layers. Here I would like to say that we tried first the liposomes. The results were good but not very encouraging. So we prepared the transferosomes because of the chemical composition. They are more flexible, and once this flexibility helps them to penetrate inside the deeper layers. And when we incorporated the phages in the transferosomes were able to reach very deep into the skin, and therefore this work shows that phages can be delivered in the deeper tissues if there is a skin infection. Then, as I said, they are only effective against the extracellular pathogens because the intracellular pathogens are not, they do not have an access to the intracellular pathogens. The liposomal membrane, as I've already said, provides protection to phage from neutralizing antibodies, and it helps the phage to enter into the phagocytic cells. How it helps the phage to enter into the phagocytic cells? The two cells, they come together, the membranes, they coalesce together with each other, and from here the phages, they enter inside the macrophages. And once they enter inside the macrophages, you know they are very efficient to target their bacteria, and once they are within the cell, they are able to kill all the bacteria which have been ingested within the macrophages, which is clear from this visual picture. Now the A is when bacteria were engulfed by macrophages without any treatment. The second is when bacteria along with the phages were given, and again you could see the results were not as good. But when we treated the macrophages containing bacteria with encapsulated phages in the lipophilic vesicles, there was complete disappearance of this bacteria, and this is the published work. We have done it with both gram-positive and gram-negative organisms, and we have shown success in all these cases. Final issue is the poor stability or viability of the phage preparation, and in vitro stability and in vivo phage titer experiments indicate that entrapped phage cocktails showed better persistence and stability as compared to the free phages. These were also evaluated in the in vivo system, and we took the conventional phage cocktail and we compared it with the phage cocktail entrapped in the delivery system. We used the burn wound model. The parameters monitored in the skin tissue post-infection and treatment included skin uptake studies, bacterial load, histopathological analysis, Evans blue assay, and the percentage of wound contraction. Somebody would ask me that what is the difference that if I'm giving a free phage or a cocktail phage, it's not making a difference because phage is finally going to attack the bacteria. Yes, that is true. But what is important is in this case is that the resolution of the infection is much faster because the percentage of wound contraction was found to be much higher when the entrapped phages in the delivery system were given, and that was the positive feature with the delivery system entrapped phages. Finally, I would like to say that till today, all the research which I have quoted is primarily on the phages that are available in the environment. But in future is going to be where the genetically engineered phages will be used. And the reason is that now fully sequenced phage genomes, they are available in public databases. Why? Because one of the main thing is to characterize these phages by doing the sequencing. So these this sequence, phage genome sequences now are available in databases. The second is there is a very good understanding of the phage structure and the components, and interaction between phages and their host bacterium has also been understood now. And therefore, the future belongs to area where genetically engineered phages, for example, in America, people are talking about the personalized therapy using phages. And there now they are talking about using the genetically engineered phages to suit a particular patient. And therefore, the future belongs to the genetically engineered phages. Now, and up till now, I was talking about the phages when they are used as such. But now I'm going to talk about the phage products. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the phage lysins. Phage lysins, they work by degrading bacterial cell wall, which is composed of the bacteria-specific molecule, that is the peptidoglycan. Different bacteria have different components and organization of peptidoglycan in their cell walls, as well as different lysins which are specific to these structures are available. Pathogens can have a slightly different composition than similar bacteria that are part of the normal microflora. To elaborate this further, I'm giving you an example of the gut pathogen, which is the Clostridium difficile, which will selectively be killed without harming the other Clostridia which might be present in the microbiota. So these lysins, they are now being taken as one of the potential therapeutic agents. And one of the important things is that they are different from the phages because they have a direct action and they kill them instantly, and no resistance has been observed till date. The other important thing is that the lysins are very stable proteins. They can be frozen, they can be lyophilized, and they are heat stable at 50 degrees centigrade. Scientists are attempting to further increase their the heat resistance. And the third point which I would like to emphasize is that lysins can infiltrate a biofilm, a bacterial community that normally offers bacteria extra protection. We will talk about this in the next slides. So now here I summarize that instead of recruiting the whole phages into phage therapy armies, the antibacterial campaigns may simply requisition the organism battle tested cell wall breaching enzymes. These endolysins, they are phage lysins, are produced by phage encoded peptidoglycan hydrolases. These enzymes are employed by the majority of phages to enzymatically degrade the peptidoglycan layer of the host bacterium from within. At the end of the elliptic multiplication cycle, I will explain this in my further slide. The structure of phage encoded endolysins generally differ between those enzymes targeting the gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria due to the differences in cell wall architecture between these major bacterial groups. I would like to mention over here that these endolysins at the moment are primarily being targeted against the gram-positive organisms, because with gram-negative organisms there are certain issues where they are not able to reach because of the different cell wall architecture in case of gram-negative organisms. Endolysins against gram-positives, they possess enzymatically active domain and a cell wall binding domain. And this cell wall binding domain recognizes the epitopes on the surface of the susceptible organisms. Now, if you look at this, here CPL is endolysin from Streptococcus pneumoniae, on which one of my PhD students has already worked. So it has an enzyme, uramidase, and then a CBD. And similarly, in case of the other identified lysins also, you can see there are two areas which can be there. This explains how the endolysins work from within. The phage enters into the bacterium. It multiplies, produces the progeny phages. Now this is the time for them to get released. The endolysin Holin system gets activated. The Holin first forms a hole within the bacterial cell wall, and once this hole has been prepared, the endolysin comes over here. As I said, they may have different activities, glucosaminidase activity, amidase, or the endopeptidase activity, and they will act at various levels within the peptidoglycan, and as a result, they will help them the release of the phages from the infected bacterial cell. I would like to mention over here that an endolysin may have one or two enzyme activities, rather than having only single enzyme activity depending upon the type of endolysin. The various advantages which these endolysins have already summarized, but I'm repeating them again. They are genus or species specific. Therefore, they act against only the targeted organisms, protecting the commensal flora. Number two, endolysins, they attack their target peptidoglycan from outside only, not from inside. Here now, when you're using them as antibacterial agents, you are putting them from outside. And this in turn decreases the possibility of development of resistance mechanisms. The specificity of endolysin activity reduces the chances of development of resistance. And as I said and I mentioned, that till today, scientists, they do not find any report in literature where the resistance to endolysin has been reported in bacteria. The endolysins are also considered safe as they do not attack the mammalian cells. So coupled with their stable nature as well as their ability to persist at various levels, frozen form, lyophilized form, or their heat stability, or their ability to attack the biofilms, the endolysins are now being considered as one therapeutic agent in the future studies. And a lot of work within our own country is going on. And in fact, one of the groups in Delhi, led by Dr. Urmi Vajpayee, is working on endolysins of Mycobacterium. And they have done a lot of work, and they are now going towards using these endolysins maybe in the animal model system as well. The second extracellular product which is produced by the phages is the depolymerase. As I said, this is basically present at the tail pins, and it helps them to identify the receptors. The phage encoded polysaccharide depolymerase degrades the carbohydrate barriers such as capsule, lipopolysaccharide, and biofilm matrix on the bacterial cell surfaces to compromise the bacterial virulence. Biochemically, the polymerases are divided into two groups, the lyases and the hydrolases. In lyase, in contrast to the hydrolase, cleave their substrate non-hydrolytically, meaning that no water molecule is released after substrate cleaving. Most of the well-characterized phage-encoded depolymerases which target EPS or LPS or polysaccharide are the lyases. The advantages of using depolymerase are these generally feature a great diversity in substrate specificity. Thus, they have a broad host range. They have a potential advantage over endolysins in that they do not lyse the bacteria, thereby minimizing the inflammatory responses from endotoxin. And finally, in the in vivo studies of the capsule depolymerase are yet limited, but they appear to generalize across different animals. Here I would like to mention that we have done this work in our laboratory where we isolated a Klebsiella pneumoniae which was resistant to gentamicin. But when we treated the Klebsiella pneumoniae first with depolymerase and then again we exposed it to the gentamicin, we saw that the gentamicin was able to kill the bacterium. We used this in the in vivo model where we used the mouse and we established the septicemia, and then the septicemia was treated by giving depolymerase and gentamicin in one group and gentamicin in the another group. And the results showed that where the enzyme along with the gentamicin was given, the results were very encouraging, and we have published this in the BMC Microbiology. And this observation indicates that enzymes can increase susceptibility of the antibiotics. For example, I'm coming to, I have already said about the biofilms. I will come to them later also. But here also, if you see, biofilm is a community of the bacteria which are enclosed in a mesh of the EPS, that is the extracellular polysaccharide. They remain protected within the EPS structure. They remain in a dormant stage, but at the same time, they do not allow the antibiotics, the phages, or the immune cells to enter inside, and therefore the bacteria are well protected when they are in a biofilm. And it has been seen that if we have to kill the biofilm bacteria compared to the planktonic bacteria, for killing the biofilm bacteria, the dose of the antibiotic is almost 100 1,000 times, and therefore this may not be desirable to be used in the in vivo system because it might be damaging. And therefore, the depolymerase has the ability to destroy the EPA structure of the biofilm, and once it is destroyed, then through this, your antibiotics, your immune cells, your other antibacterial agents can enter inside the biofilm, and they can bring about the destruction of the biofilm. This was all about the bacteriophage and the bacteriophage related products which have been used. Now quickly I'll go through about the other strategies. The first one is the antivirulence strategy. Basically, this strategy is that when the bacteria has got the virulence characters, they help the bacteria to survive in the in vivo system. But if we disarm the virulence of the bacterium, then they become susceptible to the normal antibacterial system which is existing within the body. This is more clear over here. Like pathogen has got the virulence factors, and they help them to resist clearance, invade deeper sterile tissues, damage the host cells. But when we block these virulence factors, they do not remain pathogenic, but they are removed from the system by the phagocytosis or by the various immune mechanisms that are existing within the body. There are many advantages and disadvantages of the antivirulence drugs which are being used, because this is an end thing. A lot of people are concentrating because the advantage over here is there is no lysis, so there is no problem of the endotoxin release over here. So that is the primary advantage. The second is they act synergistically with conventional antibiotics. So independent mechanisms to block in vivo bacterial replication or survival. However, the disadvantages are that most antivirulence drugs are unlikely to be broad spectrum as any of the present commonly used antibiotics. And number two, the virulence gene expression is a function of time and space in vivo, and some antivirulence drugs may not work if administered at the rare point of the infection, and therefore the care has to be taken. What are the possible virulence targets? The adhesins, the codon sensing in the biofilm generation, toxins, virulence dedicated secretion system, RN sequestration. In my laboratory, we have worked on the codon sensing inhibition. And again, I'm not talking about the biofilms as such, but I'm talking about the codon sensing. It was discovered in the early 1970s as a means of cell-to-cell communication between bacteria of species. It allows the cells to react to the environmental changes or stresses as a group of coordinating gene expression according to the local cell population density. This codon sensing is a three-step process, and it regulates the virulence of the organism. And there are various ways by which the codon sensing can be taken care. But what we have used in our laboratory is the quorum quenching strategy, where the targeting for the signal molecule, that is the homoserine lactone gram negative, was done specifically has been done by using different enzymes. I'm not going into the details over here. This has been showing codon sensing in gram negative bacteria and the gram positive bacteria. But if you look at the bottom, it is basically the quorum quenching therapy, which can be done by the natural methods or by the synthetic methods. And this shows that there is no activation of the virulence factors. The various enzymes which have been used for quorum quenching are the lactonases, acylases, and oxidoreductases. In my laboratory, we have used the lactonase enzyme along with the silver nanoparticles, and we have got very good results, and this has been published in the Frontiers in Microbiology. The third component is the strategy is the antimicrobial peptide. These are the host defense peptides. They are cationic, that is, they are positive in nature. They are amphiphatic, that is, they have got both hydrophilic and hydrophobic nature. They are alpha helical peptides, but the beta sheet peptides have also been reported. They act by various mechanisms, but the well-accepted mechanism is the membrane permeability. Here, the positive or the cationic antimicrobial peptides, they come and they attach to the gram-negative cell wall, and then there is change of electrochemical potential on the bacterial cell membrane, which results in the damage and permeation of large molecules, resulting in the cell death. AMPs have antibacterial, antifungal, antivirus, and anti-cancer activity. Natural AMPs, however, have a problem that they are short half-life, more or less toxic side effects, and their severe hemolytic activity. And therefore, there is a need to develop synthetic or the long-lasting AMP analogs. The positive features are, number one, they are different from the traditional antibiotics. They are broad spectrum. They rapidly germ-killing ability, the low bactericidal concentration, and synergistic effect to neutralize endotoxin. The other important feature is the number of cationic net charge of these peptides relates to their antibacterial activity, and this is in turn determined by the amino acid composition of the AMPs. Daptomycin is the approved marketed product, and it has been shown that the cancer cells are more sensitive to AMPs than the normal cells, and the reason they have explained is the differences in the architecture of the cancer cell compared to the normal cell, where these AMPs, they go and embed themselves into the lipid structures. And number two, cancer cells are metabolically more active, and therefore there is more uptake of the AMPs as compared to the normal cells. Besides this, the AMPs, they destroy the bacterial membrane by two ways. One is the perforation and the non-perforation modes. In the perforation mode, yes, there is a hole which is created in the cell wall and everything gets out. In the non-perforation mode, they can interfere with the DNA synthesis, the RNA synthesis, or the protein synthesis. There are other functions also. I'm not going into details. The next is the therapeutic antibodies, the passive immunization. Over the years, we have seen this has been used as a very good strategy in case of diphtheria toxin neutralization and tetanus toxin neutralization. In recent years, the immunotherapy against cancers has also now very popular and is commercially available. The second strategy is the antibodies are being labeled with toxins, the immunotoxins, again to target the cancer. And though there are no approved as antibacterial agent under the preclinical and clinical evaluation, but various monoclonal antibodies are being looked into at this movement. Vaccines, we all know this is one of the strategies to control AMR, that is the prevention of the disease. We all know about vaccines. So because of the limited time, of course, earlier they were attenuated and killed vaccines, but now we have the subunit vaccines, the conjugated vaccines, and so on, and the reverse vaccinology strategy is being employed to develop the better vaccines. The next is the potentiators of the currently used antibiotics. The potentiators that can reverse resistance mechanisms in naturally sensitive pathogen or sensitize naturally resistant strains have been looked into, and we already aware that beta-lactamase is the enzyme which degrades the beta-lactam ring. The proteins which develop in the resistant strains are the efflux pumps which will pump out the antibiotic from the cell. The beta-lactamase inhibitors like clovenic acid, tazobactam, and sulbactam have been used over the years, but the bad point or the bad news over here is that resistance to these beta-lactam inhibitors in the recent years has been observed, and therefore people are looking for other beta-lactam inhibitors. Similarly, there is a need to look for the efflux pump inhibitors. A lot of research is being undertaken by many laboratories, but till now, no product has been approved for clinical use. Finally, it is the antibacterial biomaterials. We know that over the years, implants have been used, which may be permanent or short-term implants, and maybe the catheters. And the problem is that bacteria, once they come over here, they form a biofilm. And as we have already talked, that within the biofilm, bacteria are resistant, they remain protected, and they flourish, and they produce relapses in the infection. The second problem is of the incrustation. If there is an organism which is urease enzyme producing, this will convert the urea which is in the urine. This will raise the high pH towards higher side, as a result of which there will be precipitation of the salt, and this will lead to the deposition of the crystals. And the systemic and local administration of antibiotics will not work, and therefore this needs to be replaced. Higher cost, prolonged hospitalization is contributing, and therefore again people are looking for surface coating, antibacterial surface coatings, among which the silver is the most preferred, which is being used and which is being tried. Similarly, the orthopedic joint replacements, at the moment we are using titanium, stainless steel and the other metals, but people are looking for other bone cements or the calcium phosphate based orthopedic joint implants. And this is another area which is growing at a very faster rate. In the end, I would like to summarize that the various achievements of my laboratory, we have been able to publish a lot of work in the area of phage therapy, and we have also filed patents also. So this is the basic contribution which my laboratory has made over the years, and I would like to thank all my first of all the AMI unit of Chandigarh for giving me this opportunity. I would like to thank the research scholars who have helped me in generating this data on bacteriophages. Thank you all for patient listening. Thank you very much.
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful talk, the huge work you have done. So it's a really a lifetime work in all that, and understanding pathogenesis and then finding out alternative solutions. I invite Professor Soni to just ask the questions if somebody has sent the queries on his WhatsApp number or some other queries. I also welcome Professor Kusama Jai in the meeting. She has joined with us. She is chairperson Department of Microbiology. So I think she was busy in some class, so she has little lately. So welcome, madam. So
thank you,
Professor Soni. Professor Soni, are you with me?
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Professor Sifar, for making the audience aware of an important topic of the present period. When the world is facing a problem of multi-drug resistant pathogen bacteria, which is also in some way related to the present pandemic of COVID-19. It was really informative lecture highlighting the importance of multi-drug resistance among pathogens and the importance of several non-antibiotic options to fight against it. The lecture was well responded on the Facebook, and we have several queries from the participants. I'll take a few of these for discussion with our speaker. So we have a question from one of the participants. What is the main cause of drug resistance in bacteria, and how the same can be prevented?
Drug resistance mechanisms are many. There may be an alteration in the cell wall structure, or maybe a production of an enzyme which is degrading the antibiotic, or maybe the genes have been drug resistant genes, which may be chromosomal or plasmid. So there are various mechanisms by which the resistance can be developed. Now, how this can be prevented is important thing that indiscriminate usage has been one reason for the development of drug resistance, and drugs should be used judiciously so that we are not exposing unnecessarily to the antibiotics. Thank you.
So we have another question. MDR is very common in India. And what are your recommendations on preventing the same in India?
Same which I have explained just now, and let me tell you, MDR is not prevalent in India. It's prevalent all over the world, but we should be checking the indiscriminate usage of antibiotics. When I'm saying indiscriminate usage of antibiotic, one is India has been shown to be the largest consumption of antibiotics. In 2016 report, it has been shown. So the problem is here the antibiotics are available easily to everybody over the counter, and that should be stopped. Number two, people are using it in agriculture, people are misusing it in the poultry, and therefore this thing also should be stopped so that we are not unnecessarily exposing the environmental bacteria to the antibiotics. And third, of course, many times we have a viral infection and we start helping the antibiotics when we know that antibiotics are not going to have any effect on the viruses. And therefore, judicious use of antibiotics is required to take care of the prevalence of multiple drug-resistant isolates.
So we have another question. Which of these alternate therapies is the cheapest and best?
At the moment, I would say bacteriophages, because a lot of research, as I've already quoted, this has reached a stage where this can be used for humans, whereas the other therapies so far are at the experimental stages. No such reports are available. But as far as bacteriophages are concerned, I've just quoted two, but there are many available now where bacteriophages have been used to treat the human infections. And finding a bacteriophage, as I said, from the environment is a very quick process, easy process, and therefore, in my view, among the alternate strategies at the movement, bacteriophage has shown a lot of potential, lot of success, and as I said, this is going to be one of the future therapeutic strategies.
So even I have a question. Even I have a question. Maybe I have missed the. Can I ask, sir?
Sure, madam, sure.
Can I ask? Okay. Okay. Maybe I have missed. I do not know. I have joined late. So my question was that bacteriophages, they can be applied locally where some infection is there, like wound infection is there, burn wound infection is there, or some local skin infections are there. Can we apply bacteriophages directly on that so that they can take care of the bacteria?
Yes, madam, at the movement, primarily bacteriophages are being used as a topical agent, and various microemulsions are being prepared in which the phages are being incorporated. I would like to inform you that in my own laboratory, we have used a PVC assay membrane in which the bacteriophages have been incorporated. And this antibacterial strategy can be used to treat the wound infections, which is much quicker, much simpler, and it is not painful for the patient. And we have applied for a patent, and we hope that this will be a future strategy where a bandage which has been prepared in the laboratory containing the bacteriophages will be used for the topical application for the treatment of the burn wound infection.
So I don't think there will be any side effects also.
No. They are the most safe as far as the topical application is concerned.
But for that, I think we should know that which pathogen is causing a wound infection.
Oh, yes.
Because we have to have a specific phage.
The specific phage. You will have to then first isolate the pathogen, then you will have to take it for the various with what we call the phages preparations which are available in the laboratory, and then only we'll use it as a agent to treat the infection. So identification of the pathogen.
Or maybe we can use the cocktail of the phages.
Yeah, cocktail, but still it should be tested. But if there is a severe infection in patient, then cocktail can be given as such also. But ideally, it should be isolation of the bacterium. Now, the quicker methods are available within few minutes. You can identify the organism. Once you have identified the organism, as you rightly said, the cocktail of phages will be available within the laboratory, and this can be instituted immediately for the treatment also.
Thank you.
Yes, madam. Yes, you first, Dr. Kusum.
No. I said thank you. I had these queries only.
Sir, I wish to ask a couple of things. What about the life cycle of the shelf life of a phage preparation. If we have to really put it into the market at a large scale, that will be an important parameter. So, what about the shelf life and all those parameters, sir?
We have checked them till 90 days in the lipophilic vesicles, and we found that they survive. So beyond that, we have not gone as yet, but they are almost for 3 months. They are active and they are present in the sample.
Okay, sir. Other query was just coming to my mind was: are there any ethical issues? Is there any controlling body worldwide from which we have to approval has to be taken, or same body from which drugs are being approved?
No, the Drug Authority of India will only be the one who will be giving the permission. The various modalities are being worked out in many countries, and the issues are being solved before they come into the market and they become a part of the therapy.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. So, Professor Soni, any other question if you have?
I have two more questions from the audience. Which of the alternate means of treatment are common in India?
Alternate means, as I said, at the moment, all are at the experimental stages. So in India, we are not practicing any alternate therapy as such. Yes, of course, vaccines and the biomaterials, these are of course being practiced. But if you look at the three therapies I've talked about, the bacteriophage therapy, the antiviral therapy, and the AMP, these three are not being used. But the other three are, yes, the antibodies, the vaccines, biomaterials, newer biomaterials, they are at the moment.
Another question is that several sanitizers and disinfectants are available in the market. They are alcohol-based and non-alcohol-based. Which of these can be the best against drug resistance?
Of course, alcohol-based. Alcohol-based will be more effective against. It is irrespective of, it will not affect the drug resistance, but it will be more effective.
I think the last question.
Dr. Soni? Dr. Soni, sorry. Yes.
The last question. Can heavy metals and the nanoparticles be useful in the treatment of MDR in the field?
Oh yes, that is one strategy. But at the moment, this has not been very well worked out because the silver nanoparticles, the silver was the first one to be used. But this has got a lot of issues of silver toxicity, and therefore people have started looking in the other metals also, the iron and the zinc and the other metals also. But till today, yes, experimentally they have shown good results. But as far as the treatment options are concerned, these are still at the experimental stages.
Dr. Soni, I think, yes. Yes, Dr. Soni?
To coordinate the remaining proceedings of the day.
So, sir, I think there will be no end to the questions. So that itself is an indication how wonderful lecture you have given. So I think the rest of the questions, everybody knows Professor Chibber. They can contact him personally for all their queries. So we have to interrupt all the questions because we are lagging behind that time. So thank you very much, sir.
Most welcome.
Before I ask Professor Kusum to propose a formal vote of thanks, I personally wish to thank Chibber sir for agreeing and come to our forum for delivering such a wonderful lecture. I invite Professor Kusum Marjari to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen.
So it was our pleasure to have Professor Chibber, and listening to such a wonderful talk. It was the privilege, and I thank on behalf of the department and the AMI, Professor Chibber, for readily accepting our invitation, and despite of his busy schedule and classes starting, so he accepted our invitation and he came on this platform. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful lecture, and I hope you will
really enjoyed interacting and giving my research experience over here on this platform. I'm thankful to the organizers especially Dr. Naveen Gupta, who gave me this opportunity to come and interact with my fellow colleagues and the students on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you everybody. I am thankful to all. I think we can disperse for the day. Tomorrow again we will have a lecture, and I have an announcement to make because the teaching has started. So next week, in the next month, that is starting from 16th of August, we have made this weekend lecture series to once a week. We will be having it every Sunday from 12 to 1 instead of twice a week because teaching has already started. And on an average, 2 lectures will be given by some senior professor scientists, and on 2 lectures we will give the opportunity to the younger people. So also request everybody to join in tomorrow's lecture. So again, once again, thank you everybody. So I think we can disperse for the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
वाईफाई भी चलेगा डोंगल भी नहीं चलेगा नहीं डोंगल भी चलता है तो मैं पासवर्ड नहीं पता मेरा अपना चलता है केवल मोबाइल नंबर चलता है अच्छा चलो तो आई एम रियली वो नहीं आएगा और सब आ सकते हैं वो मेरे लेक्चर में नहीं